Disclaimer. Lucas Oswald's audio is pretty rough this episode.
Hey, welcome to the Runaways podcast. My name is Cody. Today I am joined by Lucas, Dan, and our guest today is going to be Pat. Most people should know Pat as, one of the original Starvo creators in the way that it was played. Took down the first Battle Harden along with his teammate at the time, Charles. They kind of mastermind that deck, but he's played a lot of things since then. He's probably one of the players that I know who is most likely to just pick up any deck he thinks is good and bring it to an event, especially since his favorites, Old Him and Starvo, got rotated out. But for the people who don't know you, Pat, just say a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Cody. I've been playing Flesh and Blood since about Tales of Aria. Just absolutely love the game. Can't wait to, just get out to as many tournaments as possible. I've been really enjoying Levia of late. Ethan has recruited me to the Levia fangirl club here. So we've been doing a lot of fun with that deck at the moment. So that's where I'm probably leaning at the moment.
Dude, I need help with that deck.
Yes.
Dude, it's so good.
I'm going so far downhill. I'm losing every game.
You don't
To just bad decisions.
You just roll a 0 off the beginning.
Yes.
Roll a 1. Have no action points at the beginning of the game. Doesn't matter. You still win.
Yeah.
So last night I had a turn where I played 2 Blood Rush and an Art of War, and then I had another Art of War waiting, and then I swung Claws twice.
Yeah.
You played all those Blood Rush
Better.
It felt really good.
Two Blood Rushes is maybe a little ambitious, and a Blood Art of War.
I just had no turn if I didn't do that. After the first Blood Rush, it was going to be 2 Claws pass. I was like,
Perfect.
no, I want to do Claw attack.
Just do 2 claws and then set the other Blood Rush and go again.
Well, this is why I'm saying I need help.
Okay.
Fair enough. Okay, let's actually jump into our first subject for the day. We're going to talk about the XP changes that were announced. For the people who don't know, for Pro Tour, the second Pro Tour of this year, they're no longer going to be using EXP, lifetime or 90-day to hand out invites. In the past, you could qualify 4 different ways. You could qualify for through the event through a local event. You could have ELO in either of the 2 categories, and then you could have EXP for a lifetime or 90-day. They're going to be getting rid of that. On top of that, they're also going to be merging the 2 ELOs together into what's called the True ELO. Supposedly, they're able to do this retroactively throughout all of the events you've ever played, which I'm pretty excited to see. What happens there. And as far as we understand, then the only invites handed out for Pro Tour 2, besides winning a local tournament, will be the top 75 total ELO. So, Dan, I'm going to throw this over to you to start us off.
Yep.
What do you think of this change?
I have a lot of thoughts. I think it addresses a lot of issues that the old ELO system had, or the old invite system, rather. Obviously, there's things like XP farming, maybe in a not kosher way, whatever. But more on there's a lot of discourse with the old system where you'd have people in the top 50 ELO, and they're like, I don't know if I should play any events this season because I don't want to risk losing that ELO and risk my invite. Where now you kind of just have to play each season, or you're going to get outpaced on the ELO board, or you just can't enter an invite. So I think it, at least for me, I'm never going to consider not playing a qualifier season again as a result, which I like. Honestly, the harder invites are to get, the more I want to get them. So I'm on board.
Okay, on board. Lucas, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm excited. I didn't really like the XP system as a means of qualifying for Pro Tour. I think generally it was pretty indicative of skill, but I felt like it was less important. Not to bash anyone who had a really high XP. Obviously, some of the best players in the game were up on that leaderboard, but I just prefer win percentage, which is kind of what ELO is, as a means to qualify for these events. I also like the smaller events. As somebody who hopes to qualify for all of the events get easier when there are few people in them. Although they also become a lot more concentrated with high level players, which I love. I actually tend to do a lot better when I play against a lot of high level players. The harder the tournament is, the better I do. So hopefully the tournament's getting harder will bode well for me. But yeah, it just really gets my competitive juices wanting to have like 75 like world invites and then PTIs and ProQuest. Like we could see the events be a lot smaller. Um, Another thing that would happen in the past was people would qualify off of multiple um, like leaderboards, and then there wouldn't, there weren't 200 people who qualified off the leaderboard, right? And so we kind of see that just like being easier to calculate now instead of like, some person getting, 4 invites and taking invites away from other people, even though it's still fewer invites now, like it's more clean cut, like 75 top players in Elo get it. And, we don't have anybody like stealing somebody else's XP invite, even though they're, also top 50 limited Elo and CC Elo or whatever. Which also is good for my conscience because I'm always like top 50 limited and or constructed Elo, and then I'll be like 49th in XP, and I'll feel bad for taking somebody else's spot. But yeah, I think it's a cool change. I'm really excited to see how it goes. Smaller tournaments are cool. Yeah.
Pat, thoughts?
I think I'm happy about it. I would say that one of the sad things is our kind of ongoing meme of collecting all 5 Infinity Stones to qualify for the event is now going to not be gone by the wayside. But in all seriousness, I think that changing XP is a good thing overall. The lifetime players, like, as long as you basically continued to play, it was very difficult to lose your status. Like the I would say that probably the top 50 lifetime XP has been, over the last 3 or 4 Pro Tours, and large events where they're giving qualifications from XP have been, probably 95% of the same people, just because of how the system works. And for 90 day, you'll have the people that are like grinding and trying to like play every event and getting burned out. Like I know specifically some of our locals, when they're grinding for 90 day XP, like they're just so burnt out by the end of the season. And it's just like, at what cost does it come to get these invites? And, you see these players playing 4 or 5 armories a week. And, it's just like, it's not healthy for their mental capacity, even if it gets you an entry. So I do like the fact that that we'll be going to an all Elo system. I am interested to see this true Elo thing, and hopefully it is what they say, where we can go back and retroactively apply everything. And so presumably that will work correctly. I have faith in LSS that will work because, they said it will. So, but it'll be nice also to, just be like, oh, well, I can't play this limited event, because, I'm right at the cusp. So, I think that people playing more is better. And this system makes it so people play more. In these Elo events, like RTN season and things like that. Also, the value of a PTI is going to go way up, presumably. Which is, good for the people that have some, but if you are a person that has bought PTIs before, I expect the value of these PTIs to go up considerably because less people will be getting entries. So presumably more people will need to buy them.
Too.
What's that?
Less people selling too. Like there's no way mine are going anywhere.
Yeah,
I need them.
I am very upset that I split a finals of an event for LA now because, and gave the PTI away because I was like, oh, I've got PTIs, but now I'm using one and I'm like, oh, geez. So,
you brought up
I think that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I just think that it's a good thing to let the players, get more value out of these. And people like, that have 15 some PTIs will be Brody and Michael Vang and all these people that just have them racked up, will be very happy with this change. So
yeah, I think you brought up a good point about people getting burned out running the 90 day. It's not even just burned out. It's like it makes your locals better because people aren't having to grind local events for 90 day EXP and having to play sweaty when you're at a locals, which is not how it should be. And so
Yes.
completely removing EXP from the equation, I think just makes it a better experience for people going to local armories as well. And I think that's a very positive change. I mean, I'm super excited about this for a couple of reasons. One, I just think XP is bad as an indicator for a like giant event, a tier 4 event, as we've been calling it. I don't think it's a good indicator for an invite system. I think that this adjusted Elo, I'm probably getting screwed in the deal, but I'm like okay with that because I think it's better. Like my CC Elo is like trash can level, and then my limited Elo is like 8th in the world. So when those things get averaged out together, it's going to be like a trash can level, but that's fine. I don't have like any issue with that. I'll just try and win a local event, how I always qualify. I think this might hurt some regions if they don't have enough pro tour invite events. I'm not as concerned about the Elo. I did see a lot of people talk about how not having enough rated events is going to cause an issue for some people, but realistically, most people are not going to qualify based on Elo. Elo is pretty difficult, even if I've been ranked 4 in the world before in CC. I've been ranked 300th before in CC after being ranked 3rd in the world. It's just like, it doesn't matter. It's so hard to hold on to those Elo numbers. You're going to go up and down. You might as well just play the events. But the real question is, how many of the Pro Tour invite events are they having? So if these regions who don't have a lot of Elo access, if they're only getting 1 or 2 Pro Quest events, that's pretty hard. And they're already difficult because you have to win. But it's not that much difficult than our area or like this area over here. Yeah, I'm going to be able to go to probably 4 or 5 Pro Quests, and all of those are going to have 30 to 40 people at them, all trying to compete. And so that's still pretty difficult to win, to try and get that. And so I think as long as they have enough Pro Quests to go to, you shouldn't really see it hurt the smaller regions as much because the ability to qualify will be pretty similar for everybody. It's already a very hard event to qualify for. If someone disagrees, I would love to hear the other take on that. But obviously, if they only have 1 Pro Quest, if there's like Brazil and they have 1 Pro Quest, that's a travesty, right? Like that should be rectified. But if they have 3 or 4 events to go to, that's kind of the same as what we have here, right?
Yeah. Do you think that they should add more rated events or make certain events that are not rated currently now have to be rated instead then to kind of counteract this? Or
well, everything is rated. Pro Quests are rated.
Battle Hardens are rated, I guess, but like
Pro Quests are also rated.
Yeah. Pro Quests are rated. Yeah. I guess everything but
there's nothing
armories.
else. You can't rate armories. There's no way.
Yeah.
Please do not.
I think people focusing on trying to qualify via the Elo system is very, very difficult. It's not something that's most people can accomplish it no matter what region you're from. It's just a very hard thing to be able to do. And you mainly just have to spike a big event. Like it's most people who raise and lower into the Elo is they spike a big event. There's very few people who just sit there. Obviously there are some, Hamilton and Brody and them for the most part are always sitting right up there. But for most players, you're just going to fluctuate in and out of the Elo system.
Yeah, I think you're right that you pretty much just ignore it at this point.
Yeah, I just
you just play your best at each event. If you land top 75 when it's time, great.
Yeah, you just got to win a Pro Quest, right? That's hard. I would like to see more aggressive pass down in Pro Quest due to this change.
Yeah,
agree.
I believe it passes down to second if you already have qualified via winning an event. I believe that I've been told that by judges. I'm not 100%, but I believe that's accurate. But you have to have won a Pro Quest already.
Yeah. So if I have an invite, let's say I'm 50th in Elo or whatever. If I win a Pro Quest, the invite does not pass down. But potentially that could be something that they could solve. Is at the end they look at the top 75, and then everyone who won a Pro Quest, and then everyone who won a Pro Quest that was in the top 75, passed down to second. That might be a little strange. If obviously splitting is kind of a touchy subject, but the kind of fear of, let's say you get second at a Pro Quest and the person that you lost to is 70th and you don't know if they'll be 75 by the end of the season, that can be a little awkward situation. But I guess from LSS point of view, that's not really a problem because anything that's not playing
that's probably a good thing.
for them it's probably a good thing. Anything that's not playing the game of Flesh and Blood is not what they want. So
I mean, I don't think it needs to pass down based on your elo ranking, but like if I win a pro quest and the person I'm playing, in the finals has also already won a pro quest, I would like to see a way for it to pass down to third, fourth, like one of those two
And
players.
then you have to play a third and fourth game, then,
Yeah.
which adds more time to the event.
Well, it would
It
be
doesn't
played
actually
at the
Yeah,
same
it
time as
doesn't
finals,
actually-
but
Yeah.
so
It potentially could.
yeah, but it's just like I like to compete, right? Like we go to these events, even if it's a pro quest, I like to go and try and win the event. But if I already have qualified and I know how difficult it is to qualify for a pro tour event, there's like a part of me that doesn't like if I'm knocking someone out who like really wants their invite. Like obviously they should have to win, but like it's really hard. You have to win the whole event, and there's a lot of good players, and especially in a lot of pockets of the US. I would really like to just be able to compete like full out, not have to like worry about that at all, and be like, hey, if me and so make it to the finals, we both already have an invite, it's going to get passed down to third or fourth. You know what I mean? Like that just
also-
feels better, I think, for everyone, and then you get to just play the game.
Yeah. Also, from LSS's point of view, it actually promotes splitting, or sorry, it doesn't promote splitting or any kind of,
Yep.
stuff happening if it passes down, because there's the thing now where it's like, let's say I have an invite and then, I play against, I know the other end of the bracket's going to be somebody else with an invite, but I play against somebody who doesn't have an invite and it's my friend. Like there's a lot of potential inclinations in those situations to be like, well, I want you to win so that you can get the invite, but I also want to win a gold foil or any potential additional prizing that the local store is providing, and that can be where people get into splitting situations. And if LSS is trying to prevent that, having invites passed down more aggressively is a really good way of doing it. It potentially gets to the awkward thing.
It's redistributing prizes. It's not
Yeah,
prize
of course.
It is redistribution. Yeah.
It's redistributing
Very-
prizes.
it is
It's
very
very
different,
important
very
to know
different.
that wording. It's
Yeah.
very
My
different.
favorite phrase.
You're taking the pricing for first and second, and you're deciding
Yeah.
where they
My-
actually go. It has no bearing on the
Yes,
outcome.
I love
of the
I
event.
love that discussion. Like, can we discuss
Yes.
the redistribution of prize? The fun stuff.
I don't like
Yeah.
having to do any of that.
Just play it.
You
No,
know,
it's a big issue for me too.
The way we're there to play.
Mhm.
We're there to
Like
win.
as soon as I win one pro quest, I feel
I don't
obligated.
want to not.
especially
I
when
know
it's like a
Elo matters
teammate
more.
and everything else, and especially where
Yeah.
a lot of us are in the same area. I mean, I've been to ProQuest, and it's like late in the season. It's like the last ProQuest, and like the top 8 is like 5 people who already have their invite, and then it's just like a scoop session to get one person all the way up there, and you're like, cool, I would like to just play the tournament.
Yeah, I've seen people
You know?
top 8 and just not play and get invites. Like, just literally, like,
Yeah.
like you get like
Quite
5
often.
rounds,
Yeah,
you
no,
go
that
3 and
happens
2, and you get
often.
invited to the pro tour. Like, and the other 7
Yeah.
people or whatever just like don't have an opportunity to get the gold for it, right? It's kind of awkward.
Pat, it looked like you were trying to say something. Did you have a
No, the one thing that I'll say is that whenever I'm in the situation you're describing, where you've already won a pro quest, I'm going in with the mentality of I'm going to be conceding a lot of the games that I'm playing, and I don't know if that is necessarily a good or bad thing, but once I already have my invite, like I'm playing defense. I want my friends to get qualified for the event. I expect nothing, and I expect I'm not going to get any prizes for this event if I play. So that's I think that and I assume that a lot of people are in that same mindset when they're at these events. And I don't know if adding additional pass downs helps that in any aspect, but I do understand your guys' logic and points that maybe it would be better if that's the case. So I don't know.
Yeah, I just like to be able to play the events.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. I think we have talked a ton about the XP changes. I am excited to see what happens with that and how it's implemented. But we have another big topic, which is we got LL changes. Like, I didn't really
My bad,
expect
guys.
this. I don't know if anyone was like really expecting it, but all of a sudden there was just a post that said, hey, we're trying to balance LL format. And for the people who are not aware, no cards are banned, but they did restrict a whole bunch of cards. So Awakening, restricted. That means you can have one. Only one. Channel Lake Frigid is restricted for some reason. Crippling Crush is restricted. Hypothermia for some reason is also restricted. Oakenold is restricted. Starstruck is restricted. And then Warmonger's Diplomacy is restricted. So that's a bunch of changes to try and balance the LL format. is this too much? Does it do what they think? What's your thoughts? I have to go to the person who's played more Starvo than any other deck in the game. I think you've played as much Starvo as I've played Chain, to be fair. So, Pat, what do you think of these changes? What's going on?
So coming from the event in Barcelona where there was 114 Starvos and all the top 8 of Starvos, I do appreciate the fact that they're making an effort to fix the format. One of the ones that I had been calling for was Warmonger's Diplomacy. Like, I do think that card existing just like really hurts the decks like Chain and to an extent Viscerai as well, from existing in the format. Regardless of whether your opponent even played, actually, I'm pretty confident that Lucas and I and Charles all played less than one copy of Warmonger's Diplomacy at Barcelona. I know I played 0, and I think Cody played 0 as well. Because we just were like, well, we're going to make Chain prove to us that he can actually beat this card first. But we just were assuming that nobody would play Chain because they would be just afraid of Warmongers. As for the Starvo cards, Awakening obviously makes sense. This card is just the most overpowered card that has ever existed. It was, the reason why aggro decks could just not exist at the time when there was 3 copies of that card in your deck, and being able to go get a 2 card 14 off of Pulverize with an absurd hit effect. So that one makes sense to me. Some of the ones that don't make sense to me are Starstruck and Crippling Crush. I think that taking those ones away is a bit odd to me. But I can see Oakenold. I can see Channel Lake Frigid. I can see Hypothermia. Just like these powerful ice cards that one are backbreaking, and you have Hypothermia that can also just completely screw decks over, like Chain and Phi and things like that. So I don't know. I overall, I'm just happy that LSS is making an attempt to fix it, and it shows that they're really approaching taking this format seriously, which is a good thing overall. And I think everybody should, thank LSS for making an effort. Because if you see 8 Starvos, they have to do something like this to probably peel away some of the value that he gets.
I could play Chain again.
You can, yeah. I think you legitimately can play Chain.
Yeah, I looked at this and I said, "Oh, I play Chain now," because like I'll deal with one Warmonger. So you get to Warmongers me once. Hopefully, you see it on my power turn, and I'm low enough that it matters, so I can actually play my favorite deck again. Awesome. I think this is a little overkill. I mean, I don't think Hypothermia is like needed at all. Because you have to play it and it takes your whole turn for the most part, and it's like whatever. But sure, less ice for me to deal with. I'm not going to complain about less ice for Chain to deal with. But it does unlock Viscerai a little bit better as well, which I think is good. I'm not 100%. I don't think that Starvo's dead by any means, because one of the issues we were running into when we were building it, just like for everyone in the background, is like you can't run 3 Starstrucks, 3 Cripplings, 3 Oakenolds like in every matchup all the time. You can, but your chance of fusing goes down significantly, and like playing the Hyperfuse version is like way better into Prism. And so like you had to cut those in some spaces, so being restricted down to X amount of them is okay. I would have liked if they left one of them unrestricted though. I think that'd have been a little bit more balanced. But it does look like they're not banning anything anymore. Like they've just gone and decided not to ban. Honestly, my opinion is they could have just banned Awakening and banned Warmongers, and we have like a meta. But
that was what I thought that they were going to do, is they were just going to ban those 2 cards. But
yeah.
I think that they're kind of approaching it like kind of vintage for Magic, where they want everybody to be playing with the most powerful cards, whether that you get to play 3 of them or one of them is the only issue.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's at least the initial idea with that. Dan, are you joining me on the Chain train?
Of course. No, I love these changes. Having not played the format at all, I think this is now the superior format, and it's not close.
Superior format?
Yeah, all of these cards that are restricted are some of my least favorite cards in the game. Only having to see 1 at most each game sounds great. Chain's playable. I don't know. Everything sounds great to me. I hope we get a calling.
Oh, an LL calling would be awesome.
Say that,
yeah, that would be
some
cool.
number of the callings will be other Blitz and LL mainly. So we're almost
Mhm.
certainly going to get an LL calling somewhere. I mean, at least 10, what was it, 10% of callings are LL or Blitz? Like,
Just not at a major, please. I'd like to play in it.
Yeah.
I don't
New
mind.
Jersey
I think
standalone.
I think the format's
One
too young
side.
right now, but I could see
Meadowlands.
going to the Worlds format they had last year, but with Living Legend instead of Blitz. I didn't prepare for it.
Mm. I really want a reason to play
Callings.
this
Yeah, that's
format
the big
though.
one. Also, I could see like
Yeah.
I could
Because right
also
now there's
see like
nothing
service
scheduled,
during
right?
season or
No.
something like that at the local level because this format is
Oh, that would be
so
awesome.
much fun,
I like that.
and at the local level, like this would be awesome.
It's like the least new player friendly though, because what
Yeah,
new
it's
player has
not the
these
Yeah.
best
cards,
for new
but
players. Yeah.
So there is a potential that the Battle Hardened for Philly, I believe, could be LL. It's to be decided, I believe, for what the format is. It isn't like a week before PT or something like that.
I think 2 weeks.
Okay, and so like that would be a good way to like not force people to play their CC event like events at that event before Pro Tour, and then you just make it LL, and it's like a Battle Hardened that's LL. That'd
Yep.
be sweet.
I hope it's EC. I want the
My
practice for Pro Tour.
my main thoughts for the restrictions are kind of different. I like that the meta is being shaken up, and I think that Starfall getting worse and Chain of Viscera and all these other decks, Prism gets a lot better. I think that all of this is interesting. My main problem is coming from Yu-Gi-Oh! Certain cards being restricted is a little scary to me. I don't mind having a restricted list, but I wish that there was also a ban list. Some cards I think being out one is fine. Things like Oakenold or Crippling Crush or Channel Leaf Frigid are really interesting because while they're blowouts, they're power effects that you can set up and you can have this one really big power turn with them. Like having one Oakenold per game is okay, but like especially in Flesh and Blood where you see your whole deck a lot of games, being able to resolve pretty consistently one Oakenold is cool. But there are some cards whose like way that you cast them and you play them, I'm not a huge fan of being at one because they increase variance a little bit. The main two are Warmongers and Awakening. Warmongers against Chain in particular is a little bit of a scary card for me approaching it from a competitive standpoint. Because let's say you see like half your deck or so in like a mid-range or aggro mirror and you're playing against Chain, like the difference between seeing Warmongers on turn one and seeing it on Shackle 5 and not seeing it at all is potentially ridiculous. Like, there's a reason the card was keeping Chain out of the format. The card's insane. In the like, it's a blowout, right? It wins you the turn cycle on the spot. And adding a little bit of variance there is a little uncomfortable. Also, into fatigue matchups, especially if Chain's relying on Duskblade or Seeds, there are potentially like really big punishes for getting Warmongered on your pop-off turn. And if it's Shackle like 7 or 8, 9 that you're going off of, there's potential that like you're not going to see Warmongers every time as the fatigue player. And if the matchups where you're fatiguing Chain turn into I'm 70% to draw Warmongers and Arsenal it before Shackle 7, and I'm 30% to not, like that's a lot of variance to add in that just doesn't need to happen. And I don't think that there's a whole lot of value to having one Warmongers. Like I don't know that Chain's matchup percentage goes a whole lot down. I mean, playing one Warmonger is a huge swing, but like, I'd rather see his matchup percentage just go up than have people like rely on this kind of weird variancy power card. And then on the other end,
Yeah, but that fits the current build cycle of how they're making the card game. Like they want more variance. They want plays like this. They've been intentionally setting up situations to make this happen. So I think this fits with their current model. I don't like
Yeah.
it personally.
I
I agree with you.
Yeah.
I'm just playing
I
devil's
think there's
advocate
healthy
here.
variance and unhealthy variance. Like coming, like I said, from Yu-Gi-Oh, there's a pretty extensive limited list. I have this like common hot take that like I don't think that the limited list should exist for generic cards in Yu-Gi-Oh. Just having cards that are not searchable that you can only have one of. Awakening, like I said, is another example where like some aggro matchups you'll be behind, and then if you draw Awakening, you almost certainly win. And if you don't draw Awakening, you almost certainly lose. It's like you have like maybe 3 to 4 turns where you can do it and get away with it, and it's just like such a huge swing either way that I'd rather see the card at 3 so that you can consistently, like if Starvo's the best deck and everybody's playing Starvo, I don't mind it, but like if people should be playing 5 unless Starvo draws Awakening from turns 3 to 7, then it's a little bit unfortunate. So those two cards I would rather have
Yeah.
just seen banned, but everything else seems fine. I have no idea how good Starvo is, but we have a new meta, so I'm excited to go.
Oh, I think he's better now.
Yeah, Pat, I would argue, and you can let me know. Do you think this means that you should play defensive Starvo now?
Yeah, I mean, there was the old like Michael Hamilton fatigue Starvo that he showed that was like a big thing that played 0 copies of Awakening because you or going for pitch stacking. But one of the things that you were usually relying on for pitch stacking was the Oakenolds that you would be setting up to pitch stack. So you lose access to that. But like all of the Starvos that I saw, with the maybe exception of one, were all on like Stalagmite first cycle. I'm just gonna, I'm gonna fuse more than you, hopefully, and win. But I would like to see, the Ram's Head, kind of turbo defense version with like Gordy played a similar version. He still had Stalagmite, but he had turn timbers and staunches, and he was playing like a bigger game. And I got Gordy was I lost my win in the penultimate round against Gordy in that match, and it was a very interesting take on Starvo that I was happy to see. So I'm sure that we can see some more defense
There's
now
also
with the changes.
Well, most of the time, I think the defensive version does win in the mirror. Like it has, like it can 100% lose, but it has a higher percentage of winning by playing the defensive way because it's more consistent. And like now, because you're restricted on all your power cards, you have all this open space now. The issue with playing the defensive version is you just got bodied by Prism. But because you have all this open space now, you can like fill in the Starstrucks, the Oakenolds, the Crippling Crushes, fill those in with D-Reacts, and then you can still run the sideboard package, which is like put all my elements in and just like hammer the face of the Prism, because you just are forced now to have these open slots. So I think it actually might be better, because I think technically the defensive version is just a overall better deck, in my opinion, than the
We
aggro
saw
version.
this when Starvo was legal in CC too. Every band just made
I
it
think-
stronger.
Yeah.
Because you take out all this junk and he's just more consistent.
There's a
and
couple.
he's
There's
fused
a
every
couple
turn.
things about that. I think that with Awakening at 3 and like no bans on anything, I think that offensive Starvo was actually the best way to play him in the mirror. I played a lot of defensive Starvos in Barcelona, and obviously I beat all of them. I got lucky at that event. I've used more than my opponents, but I've used more than them because I didn't have 6 bad D-Reacts in my deck. I think now though, with the changes, it does really encourage you to play defensive. Which is kind of weird because you also lose like a bunch of 3 blocks. Your ice cards are a lot worse, which makes defensive Starvo a lot worse. Not having hypothermia into the aggro matchups, not having channel light frigid into the aggro matchups, not having as many warmongers into chain. Like defensive Starvo loses a lot, but I still think that it is, like these guys said, potentially better. There's also just like you have to fill the rest of your deck with more stuff now. Like those cards were in your deck in a lot of matchups. You have to replace them, and it'll be interesting to see if we replace them with Icy Encounters or Glacial Footsteps. Do we replace them with Spinal Crushes or Red Evergreens? I mean, Spinal Crushes are already there, whatever. Debilitators, no wonder, or whatever. Do we replace them with 3 blocks or 2 blocks, basically? Entangle, yeah, sure. All of these like more defensive, mid-rangey kind of things. I'm very interested to see if Starvo is becoming like Oldhim, where you have this potential pitch deck, but you're playing like CNC Pommel maybe, or like Pommel Spinal Crush, like interesting things like this, or if we are just playing like 3 Evergreen, 3 Break Ground, 3 Autumn's Touch, like 3 Yellow Autumn's Touch, like 3 Blue Icy Encounter, Blue Ice Quake.
Get those colors in.
Yeah, just like the 1 Awakening, 1 Oakenolds, better draw, Spinal Crushes, and like just hoping. And I'm really interested to see where it goes. Maybe there's a hybrid plan in there for Prism, but I think it's interesting.
Well, yeah, you definitely need a hybrid plan for Prism.
Yeah.
And I think this gives you enough deck slots to make that work, which was like the issue before. You just couldn't you might as well just go all in with it.
Yeah, your deck got worse.
I'm curious to see. I don't know. Interesting format. I get to go back to pitch stacking the bottom of my deck and then hoping they don't have warmongers. At one point it was, hey, do you have snag? And this point is going to be, hey, do you have warmongers?
Chains of Eminence is back in the format, baby.
but we will definitely be playing Chain moving forward. At least I will be. I just got to figure out if it's
If we get an event.
is it Viscerai? Is it like Vincent Chain or is it the little chain? So okay. Next, let's move to our main topic here. And I think this is something that at least I get asked a lot. I'm sure other people get asked a lot, but it's how to pick a deck for a tournament. And I want to break this down in a couple of different ways. So the first thing I want to put down is like at each level. So how do you pick a deck for your Pro Quest, right? How do you pick a deck then for, and I'm going to put like Pro Quest Battle Hardened-ish in the same area. I think those are kind of the same level tournament. And then the next group is going to be Calling Nationals. I think those are for the most part the same level event. And then tier 4 events, which would be like Pro Tour Worlds. So I don't know if anyone wants to start this off. You can go ahead and grab it. But what do you think for each level? What you should be looking for? Okay, Lucas,
It doesn't matter.
go
Just
ahead.
play whatever. It's a very simple it's a very simplified version of my answer. But my general philosophy with Flesh and Blood is you take a good deck that you know ideally, or that you want to learn and you think is good, and you can play that to the best of your ability. I think time and time again we've seen that these top events are not always populated. Like the top cuts of these events are not always populated by the decks that people think are the best. If Lexi is the best deck in the format, it's not even close. Then why are there decks that aren't Lexi in top eight? And why is Lexi top eighting one or two slots in a battle hardened? And it's because mastery is so rewarded. I do think you should be playing a good deck. I think a good way to make this if it's a step-by-step process is figure out what the good decks are, and then choose one of those, and then play it, and then play it a lot, a lot, and a lot. Maybe you play a couple, figure out which one you like. But ultimately, I think you should focus on playing the deck well over just playing the best deck, because the best deck doesn't matter. I mean, we played Icelander at Nationals, and we got Dan and I both top eight, and that deck was terrible. So
It was by far the best deck.
Not even close.
My take is very simple too.
Okay.
I think at every level, you should play the deck that you can play the best. If it's close, you should play the deck you can play the best. That is best into the meta you expect to see. The only exception is when Ice is in the format, you should play the Ice deck that you can play the best.
So my philosophy from cards has evolved over a long career of gaming, but I have kind of I think gone full circle a little bit because I was like, well, let's play the deck that I think is the most interesting, and then I was like, well, let's play the best deck and play it well, and then now for Flesh and Blood, I would say that there are certain decks that I consider quote unquote the best deck that I just refuse to play. Like I could not get my head around Lexi. I knew that the Lexi was like a better choice for Pro Tour Baltimore. I felt like I was like not. I'm actively choosing to play a worse deck based on our testing. But like comfortability has to be something that you take into account. You definitely don't need to like Lucas said, like as long as you're getting good results and you are making every best effort to play the deck to the best of your ability, you won't lose that many points in Flesh and Blood. So I think that that is one thing that I really do enjoy about Flesh and Blood is that you don't have to always just lock in and I'm going to have to play the quote unquote best deck. Where do you see time and time again where we have top eights that have 7 different heroes in top 8? It's because people are playing decks that they enjoy and decks that they are comfortable with, and they're getting the best mileage out of these decks, which is one of the things I think is so great about Flesh and Blood, and you can't convince me otherwise.
It's also like if your goal is to win an event, you really can't afford to drop games because you're in situations you're not familiar with your deck,
Yeah.
and you make a mistake. Like you're just not winning that tournament if that happens like twice.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to disagree with you guys a little bit here. I think if you're going to go play in a Pro Tour, like a Pro Tour qualifier, like a Pro Quest, I think if you're going to go play a Pro Quest, you play the most consistent deck that you're good at. The reason for that is you're going to play against players who are all different levels of skill. You don't want to play a deck that just has a bunch of middling matchups that you know are flipping coins a lot of the time. I think you want to play a deck that is very consistent at a powerful game plan. I think that's why Lexi was extremely good in the last ProQuest section. When I needed the win event, that was the deck I picked up, even if it wasn't the deck I was playing all the time. I was like, I'm not going to play Icelander. Icelander, has too many risks for me at this event. I'm just going to play a very solid, consistent deck that asks a lot of questions as Lexi. I think that's what you want to do at a ProQuest level. I don't think you just want to don't grab a pet deck if you're trying to win the event. Obviously that can work, but you want to play whatever deck is highly consistent. I think like Dromais are good picks right now for like if you're going to go to a ProQuest. I think dashes are good for that decision. Even Bravo is super playable in that position as well. If you have a good Dromai plan, but you're not going to pick like I'm not gonna pick a Zuri if I'm gonna go try and win my ProQuest, and the reason for that is it has too many completely negative matchups that it can't really play the game in. It's a little bit harder. I think these are important considerations when you're trying to win the event 100%. And you can extend that to a battle hardened as well, but you get a little bit. You can kind of try and play the meta a little bit more at a battle hardened than you can at your ProQuest. I don't think you should be trying to play the counter deck to the most popular deck at your ProQuest. Like that's why I don't think you shouldn't bring a Zuri in the last format when Lexi was around because there's not enough Lexis for you to feed on as the Azuri player. I would also say that when you're going to events that have draft as a major portion, your CC deck doesn't matter. And you're not playing that many rounds. You're only playing 8 rounds of CC. You kind of need the 5-1 or 6-0 year draft anyway. So Worlds, Pro Tour, Nationals. That's why we got away with playing Icelander. Like we're talking about how like it doesn't matter, and I agree with you guys. But like the reason we got away with playing Icelander is because 6 of the rounds were draft, so it didn't matter. Like you just have to 5-1 or 6-0 draft, and then the rest of it's fine. And so in that case, I think it's a lot better to just pick like a deck that has polarizing matchups. Like I don't want to give like too much, like it's a lot of information, but like you should just pick up a deck that has polarizing matchups to make your CC matches like a lot easier, and then you just have to coast on your ability to play the limited formats. I mean, feel free to jump in if you guys have some more comments to break in here a little bit, but I think it's a little bit more than just play what you think you're comfortable on.
Well, if I have to give advice to all of the people, I would give that advice. I do think there's like a clear exception when there's like a very clear best deck, like Chain, Starvo, Icelander, Olden. Like you have to play that deck at like ProQuest level for sure. Like you're just not winning that event probably because that deck is so much better than the deck you brought.
Agreed. I think you just want to play a consistent deck locally.
Yeah,
I think that'll make your life.
When I'm saying like play a good deck,
I agree.
So you're telling me I shouldn't play Leviathan Rolling Scavengers?
Well, I mean that's always just the best, most consistent deck. I mean, as long as you just roll better, like it's very consistent.
I've learned that Leviathan is the worst deck for ProQuest and below. That's been my experience the past 2 weeks.
I don't think I'd bring Levia to a ProQuest if I had to win it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little bit too big of a risk, I think, in my opinion. If there's another like more consistent deck that I could bring, that I think I could just like try and outskill people on afterwards, versus like having to roll and having to do other things to hope to win the matchups.
I don't think that what you're saying is wrong. Like I don't think that it's crazy to consider just playing like consistency, but I don't know. I just in my head I'm always about being comfortable with what you're playing. Like and maybe that's not true for everybody, but at least for me, when I get into the games, if I won't say like that I get into like autopilot, but you get into situations where you are very familiar with the situation that you're playing because you've been in that situation before, or you've been in a similar situation where you can extrapolate. Okay, so this turn I can block with these 2 cards, and then I can make this attack on this 2 or 3 card hand. And like for me, personally, that's why I've always kind of tended to go towards Guardians and now Brutes, because like I don't know, it just kind of fits my play style. But I don't think that going for consistency is necessarily a bad thing, but I would just at least keep in the back of your head, if you don't think that you are going to um, enjoy, or get into a point where your head like I also like, if Kano was the deck, I could not play Kano, like for example, like I just don't think that my brain capacity could handle playing Kano for 8 rounds of some event. Even if it's Kano's the best deck, like there's just no chance I'm going to play Kano at an event. And if while there are many people that can do it, that's just not me. So that's the type of things that I'm thinking about when I'm trying to pick a deck.
No, like I agree. Like, don't play a deck you can't play. Like, don't
Yeah.
play a deck that you're not comfortable on. But like for a lot of people,
But if you're going for consistency,
yeah, no, I 100% agree. Like if for your case you didn't play a lot of Lexi, it doesn't make sense if you're trying to win a pro quest to go play Lexi. Like that's not what I'm saying. But for a lot of people, they have I get asked the question of like they can play some Dromai, they can play some Lexi, and they can play Icelander. Like these are their 3 choices. They're like, what do I bring? And it's just like one of those 3 choices is completely fine. I would probably just bring the Lexi and beat people, right? Like it has the higher upside, the higher power there if you can play all the decks. If you can't play the Lexi deck, now you're deciding between the Dromai and the other one, and then you have to make a guess like how many Phais and ninjas do you actually think are going to be in the room? And then it's like bring Dromai then, because people make mistakes against Dromai, and you can probably get some free wins at like a ProQuest level that way. I think these are like kind of important things to think about if you have the capability of playing more than one deck. Obviously, when it gets to major events, you have to put a lot more time in it. But that's why our team always ends up with on multiple decks. We don't have one deck because we don't have a one thought on how you should pick a deck or what you should play, which I think is a good idea. Like it's a good thing for a team.
Yeah. Which is one thing that I really enjoy about our team is that we can take so many different decks and pilot them all to a good enough spot where you see multiple of us doing very well with different decks. And I don't know. Whereas where you see other teams where they tend to be all just one deck most
Yeah,
of
you
the
guys
time.
have five runaways in top 8 on 4 different decks. Pretty sweet.
Yeah, on all different decks basically.
Yeah, that's always a great thing. But yeah, I think it starts with just being comfortable on multiple decks and then being able to move from there. And the way the game is going right now, it's a lot harder to be a specialist. I would love to be a specialist. I enjoyed being a chain specialist, and that was some of the most fun that I've had playing. And then playing Prism, and then that got banned as well. And so, like, I would like to be a specialist, but it's very risky. It's very risky right now to be a specialist and not be, like, branching out on multiple different decks, I think.
Especially with the changes to how fast characters are going to Living Legend, because, like, before you would have maybe a year and a half, 2 years to play a hero, and now it's probably closer to 10 months to a year if the hero is really good. So it's hard to maintain that.
Yep. Okay. We do have a good handful of Discord questions. All of the questions that come from people who are in our Discord at either the Majestic Rare, the Rare or the Majestic level inside of our premium Discord. If you would like your questions answered, feel free to join the Discord. There'll be a link down below in the show notes. And then you can get your question featured on the next episode. But let's start off here with, can you give some examples of what having a game plan for a deck looks like, and examples of games you've played where your game plan changed and what you would have done if you're only looking at turn-to-turn math? And this is coming from Fighting Walloon. This is a little callback to our last episode where we talked about having game plans for certain matchups is one of the ways to play when we got a question on turn-to-turn math. That happens a lot less, I would say, in the format now, but I will say LL format that we talked about is like tons of game plans have to go into that because it's so much shorter and you have higher power turns to come back with. But yeah, what are some examples that you guys can think of some game plans going into certain
Yeah.
decks?
So there are a couple like categories of them. The first one that I think is really important is any sort of fatigue matchup, where you might get to second cycle or you might run out of cards. Having a game plan or sort of like way to beat the fatigue deck is really important. And then from the other side, being a fatigue deck, like if your game plan is to fatigue like Dash IO and you're playing Bravo, for example, You might have this blue 3 block that, if you're doing the math, you would attack for 4 with your Titan's Fist or your Anathos. But since your game plan is fatigue, it's better to block 3 if that's what you're trying to do. Um, Another like level of game planning is in some matchups, it's really hard to just do the math on some things. Like a good example of this is Dromai. Like playing Dromai, it's really hard to evaluate, how much an Asvalai is going to be worth if you're playing against like Dash, for example, because it could be worth, a bunch. It could be worth 2 swings and +3 life. It could also be worth a popper, and you lose your action point. And so I think another example of game plans is not necessarily trial and error, but getting experience in a matchup and understanding where you're supposed to either in the fatigue situation, there are more situations like this, but where you break the math or you do something that's not, the highest value play, or if the math is unclear, like another example is a card like Channel Lake Frigid or Hypothermia or Warmongers, like you can assign arbitrary values to all of these cards, but really, ultimately, you don't always know how effective they're going to be. And so, like a game plan thing would be, into Azalea, when you see Warmongers, play Warmongers, right? Value it a lot higher than you would other cards. And you can't even try to assign arbitrary numbers to these, and that can kind of be included in your game plan. Like, I'll play a Warmongers if, let's say it's worth 6 every time or whatever, right? You can try that, but ultimately, I think just play the matchups more and kind of get a feel for what the more powerful things are, and how you do them. Another good example is Prism and Living Legend, right? It's really hard to assign a value to playing a Parable of Humility, right? But if your game plan is to play a bunch of auras and overrun your opponent, then see Parable, play Haze Bending Pass, things like that. It goes into heuristics, but also just having like a general thing you want to do, and doing that thing when you can, even if you don't know what the math looks like, because you can't always do that.
No, that's a good point, Lucas. The example that I always go to when I'm talking about game plans is like Dromai versus Oldhim. Like back in the day, it was just like, okay, like if you're the Dromai player, you've got to go into the match knowing that they've got 40 some poppers in their deck, and you're not going to be able to play the normal way that you play. You're going to have to try to set up these like time snap potions or your chromite dusts or things like that. It was a lot more interesting when we had like ghostly touch as like kind of your win condition in Dromai versus like Oldhim and those things like that. Like that game is like the prime example of like going away from math and setting up for future turns. And I like the example that Lucas gave as well for about fatigue matchups as well. Like one of the things that you see when we were playing Briar at Nationals, like that the Briar deck can only do 7 to you most of the time. He's not doing more than 7 damage to you. So like you can afford to take a turn or 2 off if you're trying to set up, some sort of 6-card hand where it's like this hand is not going to do it. I can try to, set that up in the future, because if I'm wasting my cards, letting them block into me, I'm going to be losing the game.
Yeah, we would do things like IP penalty ourselves if we had a Scar for Scar or an Enlightened Strike into that matchup playing Icelander, because if we were just following it up with some other attack and arsenaling something that didn't do damage, our opponent could just kind of block out and move on, and not really, we wouldn't really accomplish anything. So even if the math says don't just pass with a Scar for Scar in your hand, a lot of the time the only damage you could deal into that fatigue deck was by making sure that you always had a Scar for Scar into an attack and arsenal a damage spell. So stuff like that, where it's damage stacking is another example of game planning.
Putting more damage into one turn cycle versus letting your damage get eaten by their blocks.
I know one of the early strategies we had as Lexi, or that I was working on playing in a fatigue, was I wanted to burn 2 of my 3 of a kinds as quickly as possible to get them in my graveyard when I'm playing against fatigue, and then I wanted to use a remembrance to cycle one of them back in, so that at the end game I could set up a 3 of a kind, have a 3 of a kind in hand, play the one from hand, play the one from here, have a giant hand, then push the rest of the damage that I need to get through. That's like a very concrete gameplay, game plan for that matchup. I'll say another good game plan for that matchup, Dan, if you want to talk about it, is your Phi into Bravo, game plan that you had going into nationals.
Yeah, I mean so for that game plan, Fi usually plays Artawar, right? But we kind of determined no, we can like play mid range better than Bravo if we just deny the hit triggers on their side when we can and push our efficient 3-card hands or 3-card 13s. So we sided all the Artawars, all the cards that didn't block, and we put in some D-reacts, and it was very consistent at beating Bravo. I actually have a specific example of like pivoting your game plan mid game at the Brawl, the Rumble rather. I played against Pat for winning in. This is Max versus Levia. And literally turn 0, I have to pivot my strategy, right? So I know what Pat's going to do because I know his strategy because we're teammates. But against a random Levia as Max, like whether they submit Carrion Husk or Tunic completely changes your strategy for the game. As soon as you see the Carrion Husk, that means you're free to kind of play the game normally. You can just slam your suit whenever you have it, unless they pitch an arc smash at some point. Then they're like, okay, maybe you sit on it. But if you see the Tunic, they're basically saying that they have the option to fatigue you. That now means I have to protect 2 high octanes throughout the game. So if I banish 1, I have to be very careful about banishing again. Another example in that game, Pat was kind enough to block with his flesh bag during the mid game. My plan at that point was to figure out a way to T-bone the flesh bag away. Once he gave it to me, that meant I could pivot to my end game strategy of resolve the mech suit and 2 high octanes in the same turn.
Yeah, I think another good one that we can give away because it doesn't matter anymore is the Leximir tech, which was cut Rainrazor out of your deck and play slightly more aggressive or slightly more defensive than your opponent, so you have more efficient turns. And because what happens in the mirror is that you both draw Rainrazor, and then whoever draws the Rainrazor is not allowed to block anymore on that turn. Which is like a big problem. If you have to block because they have good on hits, then you're stuck in this weird position. And then a lot of the times the games will go late. And so you'll redraw, you'll end up like pitching your Rainrazor to play an arrow that turn. And then later in the game, you'll draw your Rainrazor again as another no block and just run into that issue again. I remember I was watching specifically a mirror that Michael Fang was playing at a Battle Hardened. And I saw him pitch the same Rainrazor twice in that game, and both times he drew it, the look on his face was, oh my god, get this out of my hand, like because you're in like the blocking pattern. And so like one of the game plans for that was just cut all the Rainrazors. Yeah, our power goes down a little bit, but now we can block really efficiently, and we can just throw an arrow back that has an on hit and ask for resources back. And so it can be as simple as just like what you take out. The game plans are overarching all the way to like small.
Yeah, you can kind of just like notice play patterns and what you want to do in the matchup, like with the Rainrazors thing. Basically, every time I told somebody that I cut Rainrazors in the mirror, and they saw that I would cut it in the mirror, they'd be like, "What are you doing?" I'd be like, "Well, it's not. I don't like it." And they'd be like, "Well, the worst thing it is a 0 for 4." But then that's not the worst thing it is, because that means I'm letting Remorselesses hit and Heat Seekers hit and Infecting Shots hit. And in the matchup, the play patterns that I wanted to play to and that were the most successful when you play the mirror were to block an arrow with 2 cards. And playing Rainrazors doesn't really facilitate that. So even if you think that the math of a card or a play, even in a game, looks right, understanding like what play patterns have led to the high swing percentage or what you want to do, what feels best. If you find yourself blocking a lot in the matchup, you might try to find ways to exploit that, like cutting your no blocks or cutting cards that are awkward when you're blocking and things like that. And so game planning, I think ultimately game planning is just not following the math. But finding unique ways to do that is like what game planning is, really.
Yep. Okay, I think that's a good first question. We have a second question from Fighting Walloon as well. It says, what are the most unexpected or surprising decks that have won big events? What do you think gives rise to such decks doing well? And I'm thinking about this for a little bit, and there's not a lot of surprising decks that win events, in my opinion. But maybe you guys have one.
That actually won there are a couple examples.
It wasn't Kodachi though. It was Switch.
So it was Switch, but still, even just fine winning worlds was kind of out there.
I mean, we have a couple. We like go way back. The like drone Katsu deck was kind of pioneered out of nowhere. But I think we see a lot of decks doing well, but not actually winning events often.
Mm.
Like the Dash IO player that went like 14-0 or whatever it was at the calling in Auckland. I think it was Auckland. That was really impressive, even though I didn't end up winning the event. That kind of came out of nowhere. Missouri, to a degree, came out of nowhere at that event as well. We saw Kano at Pro Tour 1 come out of nowhere. Um, Even if they don't win events, they'll do well. I think a lot of the reason that they'll do well is, I mean, first of all, people don't know how to play against them, or they're not prepared for them. You know, we see Kano top 8 or win an event every other month because people cut AB, they cut Spell Void, they cut Oasis Respite, or they're just not ready for it. Like, you know, they don't know what they're doing against it. The Dash IO potentially, like, a lot of people don't know how to block against boom grenades, and they're not prepared to get fender bendered on the last, you know, part of the chain or whatever. Um, and so there's definitely an advantage to playing an unknown deck. But also, decks have to break out at some point. And if the first events, if the first couple events of a format are, you know, 1 to 2 weeks after the set comes out, those decks probably aren't going to do super well because people haven't figured them out. So if you see decks start to do well, you know, a month or 2 months or a format after they come out, it might not be because of some like strange thing where people didn't know what they're doing. It might just be because it's been a while for, you know, the decks to become good and the list to become good. We saw that with Zuri. She kind of struggled at the start, but she slowly like started doing better and better. And then she was the Lexi killer, and then we realized maybe she's just a good deck that has good matchups. You know, we've seen those with Dromai consistently doing better over time. But I think like ultimately why decks come out of nowhere is people are unprepared and people just haven't figured it out yet. The deck's got to do well at some point if it's going to be good, and some tournament's got to be its breakout tournament. So it's bound to happen for everyone.
I mean, yeah. So perfect example, in my opinion, is Fatigue Briar at
Yeah.
Nationals.
Yeah.
Like
We were not surprised, but I'm
yeah.
sure
I
other
mean, we
people
weren't
were.
surprised. Yeah, you guys weren't surprised because you guys we tested against it.
We're
But
playing the deck, of course.
like,
We were
I went 7-1. Well, I mean, well, we knew that it existed. I mean, it's not like other people didn't know that it existed, but like in its capacity to like come out of nowhere, I think that it definitely exceeded expectations. You like had people like myself, Charles, and Jimmy, and Dalton all playing the deck and all going at least 6-2 in constructed. And the the funny thing is that you're beating Dromais, like you're beating like, you know, things like that, that matches that you should not be able to win if your opponent knows what you're doing and it is capable of coming up with a game plan that, you know, linking back to the previous game, like, now they can see, okay, well, here's your strategy, so now I have to adjust. So I think that one is like a huge example of a deck that, you know, is a surprising way of thing. And then another one I'll say is Reinar, like winning the calling. At Lille, was it the calling at Lille? That was another one that I remember I was being very surprised by, and it was kind of like the more smash with big tree. Was it Chandler? Was it? Yeah, I don't remember who it was, but that it was like, I remember specifically it was like the smash with big tree, like very more value oriented Reinar. That was one that I remember. Yeah, it was Chandler? Yeah, I thought it was Chandler, but wasn't sure. But like, I remember being very surprised at that one as well, because that's just a deck that I would not have expected to see win an event for sure.
Yeah, I
I
think
think
those
you have to
are-
say Bowlander too.
Bowlander, yeah,
Yeah,
Bowlander
it's
is
just a
another one,
US Nets
yeah,
trend.
The
The most innovative deck takes it down.
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, I guess. I mean, that was a little hard for me because I was playing it in practice. Like I was playing a Bolander list that I was like, oh, I'm just not sure if this is good enough yet. I'm going to work on this in Worlds, and then like,
Mhm.
it's a funny story. Like then I play Hamilton on round 4. After, and I sit down with Hamilton and like I show that I'm playing Oldhim, and he shows he's playing Icelander, and I was like, hey, I almost brought an Icelander list, and he's like, oh really? I was like, yeah, but it's like a weird list, it has like attacks and stuff in it. And he was like, "Oh, really? Like Command and Conquer?" And I was like, "No, like Wounded Bull." And then his like first turn, he's like swing Wounded Bull at me, and I was like, "Oh my god, it's this deck! You're playing it." So that's a fun story that him and I talk about from time to time. But like, so I wasn't surprised. I guess I was surprised how good it was into Oldhim, because I hadn't got enough time to work on that, which is why I didn't bring it. And I was like, oh, no one else is going to play this crappy deck. I'll just work on it for Worlds. Little did I know. I don't think the Fi at Worlds was very surprising to me, because CC doesn't matter at Worlds. Like, it's only 8 rounds, and if you get a couple of Dromais, those are free wins, and then the rest of them you're flipping a coin on. Like, if 40 something fives show up, as long as some of them do well in draft, you should
Well,
expect
that was the
to
real
see the
surprise
fives.
for me.
Oh, that 40 showed up?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. I mean, he still played incredibly well, especially in the top cut. So not to take anything away
Absolutely.
from his win by any means. It's just like, when I saw they got in there, I was like, yeah, 40 people bring Fi. A couple of them are going to have some good runs, and you're going to end up with Fi's
But
in
also
the
the
top
amount
8.
of Icelanders you have to go through in that top 8 was
Hey,
impressive.
I think that matchup's hard. I think the Fi
Oh, it
Icelander
is.
matchup is like not as Icelander
I was scared of
favored as
Fi.
people would say
Everybody
it
was
was.
calling me a fool in testing. I was like, wait, is Fi good
Yeah.
to Iceland? And they're like, no.
Draw Channel Lake.
I did draw Channel Lake in my Fi game.
So, but yeah, I do think, some of these are surprising, but most of the time, I think it's like a numbers game. If enough people bring a deck that is high powered, like Fi, I think Fi is a great example. Like, Fi can just have like pop off turns that are just like better than what other decks can do. It's just like, it's not going to happen for everyone who brings Fi. And some of the Fi players who bring it are going to play like a lot of Dromai and get free wins. And you're just kind of like, if you're bringing that deck, you're kind of hoping that you're one of those people who has one of those runs. And if enough people bring the deck, some of those people are 100% going to have those great, Swiss runs. They still got to earn it in the top 8. Like, it's not like it's easy in any way, but like it was the same with Briar. When Briar was showing up everywhere and it was the aggro version, like, you knew you were going to have some Briar in the top 8 because you knew some percentage of those Briar players are going to draw Channel Mount Heroic in every single game in their first 3 rounds. And those players are then going to be in top 8, right? I think it's the same kind of thing when you look at a lot of these aggro decks.
Yep.
Okay. I will read this question because it cracked me up, but it says, there's no way banning 47 cards from Starvo and hitting every Guardian and Elemental deck along the way is the right thing to do. How would you define a fixed LL format? What changes would you make to fix it? That's from Suji Time. I will say, the one part I do like this is, what do you consider a fixed LL format? I think that's a good question. Like, how do you think a balanced LL format actually looks? Like, what makes it balanced?
At
I think
minimum,
the
you should be able to
balance-
play the heroes who LL'd.
Yeah, I think it's just like
I don't
any
know.
other meta.
I think we have to discover that.
Yeah, I think, at least in my opinion, I don't see a difference between Living Legend and any other like format in any game. I personally prefer formats that are a couple heroes, like somewhere from 2 to 4. But like, I think it's always going to be different for everybody. I think maybe seeing Starvo for some people just exist is too much, and having to hit decks like Starvo in such, like, as he so poetically put, cutting 47 cards from his deck is maybe a little too much if you want Starvo to be in there. But I mean, Starvo's a problem. Get rid of him. He'll come back later. He always does.
I still think that Starvo is going to be very good with these changes. Like, I don't think that you're going to see Starvo drop off the LL meta. Like, yeah, maybe they went a little heavy handed with the number of cards, but like, we had literally 114 Starvos and 8 in top 8. Like, that's not a good sign. That's not a good showing for their first kind of competitive Living Legend format. And I think that LSS took that seriously. And if you want a quote unquote balanced LL format, you need to make sure there are multiple heroes and it's not literally 11 rounds of Starvo mirrors. Like I one of my games was not a Starvo mirror at Barcelona. One game, and it was against Viscera. Like, it's just you need to have multiple heroes in the format, I think, because you're playing, not Starvo the format, you're playing Flesh and Blood.
I think it's a good point. I mean, I am fine with the format being degenerate. I think that the format should be degenerate. I think that's one of the calls. I think the cards, my opinion is cards that do not allow other decks to be degenerate along with the degenerate decks should be not in the format. And that's why I don't like Warmongers, and that's why I don't like Awakening. I think those two cards punish other decks for trying to be just as degenerate as Starvo is. And it just says, no, you're not allowed. Only two decks are allowed to be degenerate, and that's Prism and that's Starvo for the most part. And it's like, I think those cards should go. Just let everyone just be overly powered, right?
Yeah.
But
Also,
you only need like 2 or 3 decks, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like, we don't need Riptide to be balanced in any format, right? Like, we don't need like Katsu playable. We don't need like these certain other decks. They just don't need to be playable.
Yeah.
right?
I mean, like, but should a deck like Lexi be playable? Like,
Probably
Lexi, I think should be like a deck like Dan's saying, like you should be able to play the heroes that LL'd, and I don't think you can play Lexi right now. Like,
I think we should restrict more cards. Make Codex a 1 of too.
Yeah. I think there's also kind of to point to his point about like, is this the right way to do it? I think surely the devs have been working on these balances for a while. Like, I think they've known that this is how they wanted to balance the format for a while, and they're just
Like, surely they now
Yeah,
know
like,
that
they-
Starvo's pretty good.
they didn't
Unlike the last
restrict
time.
8 cards because one event happened, and they were like, this is probably fine. Like, surely they've done testing with this format before. They know they want it to be good. I think we've all heard the story of Brian Gottlieb walking up to somebody at Barcelona and being like, "Oh, the top 8 of the battle harden's up," and he's like, "Oh, is it 8 Starvos?" Like they knew
Yes.
what was good. Like, I think that this has been working.
Yeah, but I don't know if that's a Starvo issue as much as it's a
I agree.
Warmongers issue.
I'm just
If I'm just being completely honest, I think it's
Yeah, I
just a
agree.
Warmongers issue. Even with
I agree.
Awakening, I think Chain can 100% still play that matchup, even when they have Awakening. I've done it. I've played that matchup a bunch of times. It's hard. It's difficult. Like, there's a lot of there's sometimes you push on round like 0 and they Awakening you right away, and you're like, well, I just wanted 2 damage of Arcane. That's all I wanted, but never mind.
how dare you attack me on turn 0?
Yeah, exactly. And so, like, but it's just Warmongers. Like, Viserai is 100% a legit deck against Starvo. Like, the combo Viserai,
I think it's the best deck if Warmongers is actually
it's
gone
so good. And so, like,
against Starvo.
that opens up that. And, like, Prism just gets dumpstered once you start allowing these other decks to play the game. Like, Prism, in my opinion, is the lowest, like, is, like, not a very powerful LL hero, just like Lexi isn't. They're like, it's like a different tier than Chain and Starvo. It's like Chain Starvo is way up here, and then it's like Prism and them are like way down here, because like Prism can't compete with any aggro decks. It's just like it's run over. It's like whatever. And then like Lexi LL'd in a weak format anyway, so like it's like significantly weaker than the other decks. It's not doing near as degenerate stuff. So I just think it's a Warmongers issue that's letting Starvo just run a miss.
Yeah, I mean, I just come back to most of us didn't play any. We were like, let's let the chains prove to us that they could do it, and maybe they hit all the Warmongers and they died. But I played 0 chains, and I didn't see any chains anywhere near the top tables.
I played 1 chain when I was X and
Mhm.
1, and it didn't matter because they had too many cards in their deck. They had like 75 cards in their deck, so they had no pressure, and the game was just like folded over. But yeah,
So I don't know. I would love to see what the new meta will look like, and see if we can test that further.
yep. I feel for Viserai. Like, Viserai really wants to play the game, but like they take so many turns to set up that like the chances of you having a Warmongers and setting on it, and then the turn that they take damage, you just play your Warmongers, and you're just like, is a little scary.
Smack to reality. I almost got Chris Ioli. He had the
Yeah,
unbelievable.
yeah. We had it. I was waiting. I was hoping. I put it in against the chain because I was really hoping to just break all the shackles. So, okay. Next one here comes from Cusco. With the changes to the LL, what cards would you personally put on a watch list for potential restrictions in the future, and why is Icelander not playable in the format? It was never playable in the format. Icelander is not strong enough. It's just not a good enough deck to play with other heroes. I mean, we've seen Chain beat Icelander, which a lot of people thought wasn't possible, but it just doesn't matter. The deck's like good on a number value reason, and in LL format, no one cares about a Frostbite.
Yeah, Chain has so many blues that that doesn't even matter. Like Chain can just power through ice cards. Like, I remember how many games against Cody have I played where I had Channel Lake Frigid out and he still goes 6 wide. Like,
Oh,
it's just like it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I think the most.
Yep.
I think
but
yeah, I think
little
maybe there was
discussion.
something if Icelander was allowed, maybe she could have been okay into chain like fatiguing, but the Starvo matchup is like so garbage. If they have Arcane Barrier in their deck, like oh my god, like you don't even have a win condition. Like what? Like you get a wounded bull them, like they'll either block with two cards and swing hammer, or they'll just kill you. Like,
Can you imagine winning bowling a Starvo?
he's just like
Just
okay,
Okay.
well
You
I guess
got it, boss.
maybe now. I don't know. It's also I've seen some people online complain about like Lexi and Icelander and Oldhim to a lesser extent, but Bravo getting hit by this list, but nobody cares. Like Dan said, we don't care about those heroes. Let the LL.
It's not like it's going to LL
Yeah,
to play.
Oldhim I think is an
like
exception.
that's not what you're
Actually,
thinking. Like
I think
Oh,
Oldham's
Oldham's
different, but I
different,
think for
yeah.
Icelander and like Bravo, people are mad about Bravo getting hit. Like, oh no, like,
And like they can print an Oldhim spec in the expansion slot, right?
yeah.
Like they
Oldham,
can buff these
Oldham,
heroes that got
I
hurt.
mean, hey, there's a card for Oldham, the
Oldham,
Northern
yeah.
Winds or
yeah,
whatever.
the best
You
card
can
in
play
Flesh
it.
and Blood
You can test
before we
that.
knew what it did.
Yep.
That was a wild
Dude,
like
the card
time.
was insane. Like it was broken, and then it was never.
Yep.
Okay, next question here from Julian is what's everyone's opinion on the highest and lowest skill ceiling deck in Fab?
Highest is Dash IO,
I
in
agree.
my
I was
opinion.
gonna
I
say
100%
Kano,
agree.
but
I don't
Levi-
think
like
Kano
Levi,
is
Kano are
there's-
respectable. I think it's
I
Dash
think
IO by
there's
far.
different-
like
This is-
here's a hot take. Here's a hot take for everyone. I think Kano is hard the first 5 or 6 games you play
Yeah.
with Kano, and then immediately after that, the deck is
Yeah.
really simple. Like you get back into a corner where you just have to go off, and then you just see if you got it. But like once you understand how to hit the combo from like 7 different angles, you're just like, oh, this is just what I'm doing. It's the same thing every game. It's very much like you're playing the same game all the time. You're just hoping that you hit something off the top. Sometimes you have those turns where you like have to draw 7 tomes in a row in order to win the game. But like if they do happen, then you win, and if they don't happen, they don't. But you didn't have to make any decision around that. So like I think the
there's,
deck's
like,
pretty
different kinds of
simple.
skills, right?
I'll-
Because there's things like Kano where
Yeah.
it is really, really hard to play, but you have like once you put the reps in, it's pretty simple. Like it's like a preparation skill deck. Because it isn't just wildfire comboing and everything, right? There's pitch stacking that is difficult and it takes time. There is like doing math on whether you should go off or not, and understanding how to chip certain matchups. But like ultimately, like once you know what you're doing, the games are pretty easy. And then there's decks like Levia or Dash IO, where every game is so different and so dynamic that there's a lot of skill like within the games themselves that exist outside of just general heuristics and preparation. And there's kind of like a scale on that. Like Icelander, I think, was kind of more towards Kano, where like a lot of people said Icelander was really hard to play, but that deck was really easy once you'd played it enough, because most of the games were pretty similar. It's do I arsenal this card or this card, and that was like the only decision you really made. But there are like really other hard decks like Dan said, like Dash IO, where not only do you have to put the work in, but you also have to play at the table and play differently. Yeah, obviously the hardest
And
deck.
none of those games feel the same. Like I agree. Like
Yeah,
that.
you have like infinite decision
Yeah,
trees.
Dash IO
in
is
that
just
deck.
infinite decision trees, and like I had a Levia game at locals that I had to sit and tank for like 10 minutes to try and figure out because I had like 27 different options. I'm playing like the spoiled skull helmet. I flipped over into Blasphemet, and like and so I'm trying to figure out I have to kill my opponent in this one turn. And so I have a million different actions that I don't know the result is going to be. It's incredibly difficult to navigate. And even after playing it, I'm like, I'm pretty sure I played this turn wrong. I would need another 30 minutes to walk everything through to figure out. Like that stuff doesn't happen in Kano and other like Icelander and
Were you
stuff like
talking
that.
Levia there?
Yeah.
Or Dash IO? Oh
Like,
yeah, yeah.
Like
No, it's the same
Levia.
for
Like
me.
it's just, you know.
Yeah. And then there's always scabs. Like, do I do it? I don't know.
Yeah,
Let's do the
Chain
math.
is another example, I think, of a deck that's really easy to play once you've played it now. Honestly, I think if you've
Don't
done
say
well
it.
with Chain, I mean, it's really just a testament to being able to put work. It's not.
Hold on. It's easy to do well with chain. The skill ceiling is quite high.
Yeah.
What's
The
the
one
lowest?
point
Is
that I
it?
was
Is
trying
it?
to-
No,
you got
let Pat go.
Yep.
No. The only point I was trying to make about Kano specifically is yes, like your lines are very simple, like to figure out like how to pull the combo off and like what to do to get there. But the spots to pivot, like when are we blocking and when are we going for it? Those are the things of the decision, in my opinion, that are really hard as Kano. because like you are not only having to put yourself where you're where what Cody was saying, like when you're backed into a corner and you ideally don't want to do that. So that, to me, that's the one the thing that I think makes
I do think
Kano
that's
very
another
difficult.
learnable thing to a degree. Is like if you play
Sure, maybe it is learnable, but for me specifically, I think that makes it one of the more harder decisions to make, because like yeah, you can block. I've seen plenty of Kanos just like just over block and just like never turn the corner, or I've also seen Kanos like try to go for it too early, and it's just like you've been in these spots where seeing both sides of it, and then you see the good Kanos that actually win, and it's like, would I have made that decision? Probably not. Like
there are no
I
good
don't know.
Kanos.
Like
Kanos don't
so.
win. What are you talking about? These are all just guys
I
who know how to
mean,
hit cards.
I just think it just feels
Julian just won.
different than playing like Dash.io or even
Yeah, I just
Levia.
think the ceiling's lower.
It's just completely a different.
It's hard to play, but
I will not disagree that Dash
think-
is also very difficult.
It's just a whole different level of difficulty. You
we
have
just don't
too
even
many
know
options.
the ceiling on Dash.io yet.
Yeah.
I mean, there's
no one's
there's
gotten there.
Like I said, there's like two scales, and Dash.io is just like really high on both of them. Like you really have to do
Yeah.
a lot of work and also just know what you're doing at the table. There's so much that goes on. Prism, I think, is like
What is the least skill?
I think
deck?
it depends on which category.
Yeah, I'm wondering, is it Pouncing
Depends on
Links
the
5?
category. Pouncing Links 5
Pouncing.
Like Pouncing Links 5 is literally just numbers. Once you learn the Phoenix Flame tricks, it's just understanding how much damage you can do each turn and the important damage.
I think it's
specials.
Bravo.
I think Bravo has more expected value than decks like Phi. Because Bravo, like, you have to weigh, like, how much is a Spinal Crush worth? Because, like, you swing a Spinal Crush, or you can block 6 and swing 4, and it's like, it's 9 versus 10 value, but maybe you're getting enough points from not throwing it, or, like, how much is a Dominate worth? I do think he's relatively easy to play, but, like, Phi's, like, you just do the numbers when you're playing Pouncing Links. Or, like, there are a couple other examples, I think, like, Starvo in some matchups, like into Viscerai, like, wow, me look at hand, me say Bazinga, me swing, me go, like, it's pretty simple what's going on. Like, there's no tricks.
If I'm trying to rate it
in that matchup,
Yeah.
but Starvo mirrors.
Yeah, I agree. I think honestly, if you can win the
think-
Starvo mirror consistently and nobody else can in a given event, that you're just the best player in the world. Like, if you play like 9 Starvo mirrors and you win all of them, like, you're insane. Like, get out of here.
I think playing perfect on Bravo is easier than playing perfect on Phi.
Yeah.
Sure.
Bravo perfect's a lot easier, I think, to get to that point than it is to Phi. Aggro decks are deceptively difficult to play perfectly in almost all card games, because you have to push every little bit of damage in order to actually win with that deck most of the time, depending on what the format looks like. I think Bravo playing that deck absolutely perfectly is probably the easiest.
I think Bravo has.
I like them both as like the
they're close. I think they're close.
Because like Phi, there's no disruption, right? Like you're
Maybe it's just because I really like
playing out
Bravo.
the mall and
I
understanding.
think
the
usually
current state.
any deck that's game plan involves blocking is always going to be relatively difficult. Where like Phi, like you do block, like you're not going to win basically any game playing Phi where you just never block.
That's why I'm saying like combo Phi.
But like I think playing Bravo, like I don't know, maybe it's just because I'm going to play Bravo soon. Like I might play it in a tournament, and I've been playing a lot recently. But like I feel like he's been pretty challenging. Like I've definitely seen a lot of people play Bravo and make decisions that I wouldn't make, even if they seem like reasonable. Just because there are like so many different things that you can do with so many hands that aren't like immediately obvious. But I'm also just bad. So
one thing, and another one that I'll say is probably lower is Kasai in Blitz. That deck very much plays itself a lot of the time. Like whenever you're like, oh, yeah, make my attack reaction and make my 2 attacks, and then combo off with the blood on the hands. I think that one's like relatively low skill level, because like most of your turns are kind of the same.
I played that deck in a team battle hard. That was like the easiest tournament I've ever played. I had one challenging game where I played Pistol Plan into a Fatigue Dorinthia,
boost.
And every other matchup was just like, if I drew 2 blues, I'd block 3. Otherwise, I'm not blocking. Like, there's not a whole lot going on here. I can't do anything else. I have my pounder. I have my bounty card. I have my pistol. Go. Like, I just played half of Brody's Viscerai or Vincent chain deck. Like, that was my job. My games were over in 5 minutes because my hand said boost and then they were dead. It's very simple.
Okay, next question here from Matt is how much do you guys use the hyper geometric calculator for constructed and limited deck construction?
I use it a lot actually,
Yeah, I'd say for most decks, we
especially new decks.
check our math.
Especially new decks because some decks we like generally know like how many we're supposed to like because you usually you use it for ratios like that's what it's there for. But for new decks, it's like how many blues do I want to see per hand? How many can I afford to see per hand? Do I need a blue? Is 2 blues okay? Is 3 blues okay? Like that stuff is where you use the calculator, and it's really effective. I would say for stuff like Bravo or Icelander, like really didn't use it a whole lot because once you figure it out, like once you played it enough, you don't really need it past then. It's kind of just like a feeling thing. Like we knew forever from Icelander, it was like we wanted somewhere between like 38 and 43 blues, depending on the matchup. And it was like sometimes we were just like, you're crazy for playing 38 or you're crazy for playing 43. But like, we were never like going to the calculator and being like, is it better to play 39 or 38 in this matchup? Like, I don't know. Like, just choose.
Yeah. We'd also look for like the point of diminishing returns. Like, when we were testing Fi against Icelander, I think 18 blues was that point, and that gave you like 1 in 6.5 hands to have no blue. Like, that's not playable against Icelander. So I was petitioning we need 25 blues because that puts you at like 11%, and that's the only like reasonable number I saw to like consistently win that matchup. But you can't play 25 blues in 5.
Coward.
I got to be honest, I did not know what the hypergeometric calculator was. Matt sent me a message on Facebook, and he was like, "Do you use this?" And I was like, "What are you talking about? I don't know what this is." I am usually a player that kind of doesn't use math that often when building decks. I'm usually playing by feel in my games and when deck building. So maybe I can use this to improve my game. I've definitely been looking into it, and definitely gonna take some efforts to try to apply it to some of my stuff. But I don't know. I think that you don't have to. I don't know. That's not the way I approach deck building.
Necessary, I think, a lot of the time. Like, because most of it you can just use feeling for. Because Flesh and Blood is a game like.
I think it's helpful at the beginning.
Buy that.
Like, when I was first learning and building and working on Chain, we used it quite often. But we used it so often that, like, now I just kind of know in rough areas where I want blues and stuff to be based on how other decks perform, with those similar numbers. So it's like not as often needed unless it's like the great example is the Fi into Icelander match when we were talking about that before. We're like, okay, how big of a deal is 16 versus 19? Yeah. Is there a happy medium in here that we can just lean into that's just like, this is good enough? Right.
The heuristic for that matchup is literally you need 1 blue every hand.
Yep.
If you do that for the whole game, you're probably winning.
Yep. But yeah, maybe a little more. Also from Matt here is, what cards do you think Vincent needs for her to pick up more slots in tournaments? And I will answer this very simply. A power card. She is in need of a power card. Playing Vincent is like playing Briar with no Channel Mount Heroic. The deck is still good number-wise, but there's nothing to catch you up from getting a Runeblade hand. And so, like,
is Revel in Runeblade not a power card?
Kind of a power card, but you just need to do a lot. Like, it's still just part of a big turn that Vincent has.
Revel is not Channel Mount Heroic, right? Like, these are.
There's no way that's a power card.
It needs a Channel Mount Heroic in order to play the game, because when you're playing.
Power cards are like 1 card for like 7+ value.
Yes.
Codex,
we currently have like Blood Rush, Codex.
And when you take 1 turn off, you lose all of the numbers that you've gained throughout the entire game, and there's no catch-up mechanic for that. So you just get hard punished. Also, I would never expect Vincent to actually be good in this game. It has been mentioned several times by people who, like by LSS, that like letting her play stuff for free is scary to them. So I would never expect her to really be pushed, which is just sad.
Yeah, the other answer other than a power card is obviously she has consistency problems. Like, there are theoretically like ways to increase her consistency, give her more Runegate cards, give her more envelopes, or just like ways to use her hands and like make rune chance. Like, maybe another good weapon. Like, her weapon right now is pretty bad. Like, it's serviceable, but it's not a good weapon. Or potentially like 3 blocks. That's a problem that she has right now. Is like when she gets her Runeblade in hand, it's 4/2 blocks, and you banish a card at the start of your turn. So like if you have 4 non-attacks, like your hand is worth 8 at best. Like that's really scary. But like if you could get a bunch of 3-block non-attacks in those slots, maybe it's okay because your hand could be worth 12 or even 10 or 11. Like God forbid you can play your cards or block with your cards in like some reasonable fashion.
I think the new card helps though, and I think it's
I
really
think,
good in
I think
Blitz.
the new card's good. Yeah, yeah. More close.
Okay. Last question here from ADC God is Prism hype
Yes.
overblown? What will her actual level of compatible viability be, especially when a set filled with poppers and other brute toys are about to be released?
Yeah.
So how good do you think Prism actually is
I
going to be?
mean, I don't think it's her meta. I think she gets a power boost.
No.
Her matchup into the aggro decks gets a lot better, but honestly, I thought she was already really good into the aggro decks. I thought the main issues were Dash IO, or sorry, no, Dash 1, Dash Inventor Extraordinaire, obviously Dromai, and then Brutes. I think those were like the biggest problems, and I just can't see how Brute and Guardian or Brute specifically get worse. Dromai gets worse, and also Dash 1 gets worse. Maybe if the new Warrior cards and the new Guardian cards are really strong, but they're not strong in a way that makes the Prism matchup better. Like that could be good. Like if the meta devolves into like Warrior and Dash IO and Bai and Katsu and Bravo, and those are the best decks. Like Prism, fine, but
I think it's Brutes versus Mechs.
Brutes and Mechs
That's what's
are
coming.
both bad matchups for Prism, and then also like good God, if there's another illusionist out there, like you just forget about it. Like you'd be like me at the 10K and literally just concede and get ice cream and like there's no worth.
Oh, that ice cream.
It was
It was good ice cream.
I miss it.
Yeah.
Dude, I think about it every day.
I think Prism is way better than she was before, but I don't think this meta is going to work. Just like you said,
Yeah,
Lucas.
the weapon does seem quite strong. I think it's definitely going to be a boon for the hero, but you're coming into a set with presumably a whole bunch of hoppers being added in, so we're going to make these decks, and
that's why the Brute matchup is so hard.
Yeah, agility
like
tokens, and things like that.
You can't just pop my Herald and then roll scabs to kill my passing rush. Like that's just actually, like that's just cheating. Like, dude, I spent 4 cards to like Genesis passing, and just like roll scabs, claw claw. Like, go. Like, come on. I worked so hard for this.
Yeah, Scabskins is a pretty messed up card against Illusionist.
Yep,
it's a pretty messed up card in general, to be fair.
Especially against Brute.
We'll see. I think Prism might see more play just because people want to play her, and this gives you a good excuse, and it gives you matchups that like feel kind of overwhelming in your favor now,
easy to play.
Which is nice to play, and pretty easy to play. Yeah, and they're pretty enjoyable. But I don't think everyone was always worried about that weapon, but I don't think that weapon's going to make her tier 1. I'd be very surprised if we come out of this next set and Prism is the best deck in the game. Be very surprised.
Yeah. Also, I don't get to play 30 blues, so you don't have the best deck builder in the game on the deck. So, like, why are we even bothering?
Well, thanks, guys. We have ran this a little bit long today, so we got to go. Let's go. Goodbye, everyone.
What I could do here is go ahead and play the envelope.
All 3 pitches of Envelope and Darkness.